quick disclaimer. Anything that's financial or medical related in this video is not advice. So talk to your doctor, talk to your financial advisor, etc., etc. But this is just my opinion, my thoughts on these subjects. So that's it. Thanks. Enjoy.
What are we talking about today? So earlier, I think this was yesterday, I was taking a moment to reflect. I had purchased a new screen recently. It was a new OLED screen just to improve my desk setup, and a couple of other miscellaneous items like an under-desk treadmill and a newer desk, and done some things to upgrade my home work setup so that the acts of doing work were more compatible with the level of health I wanted to have, to reduce the friction between a desire to work and the desire to maintain health and fitness and wellness, and to structurally, as much as possible within my means, fuse those two interests in a manner that was not mutually exclusive, if that makes sense. And as I was doing that, it kind of led me down this rabbit hole of reflecting on purchases and the ways in which money and spending money and how we use capital, use currency to modulate our lives, how exactly that can add and detract value. Now, I was thinking about this as well, what kind of originally inspired this first thought was, I've been working on building this biographer AI that, it listens to my plot, and but long story short, just something that can help create a biographic of context by taking a varied set of sources of data, whether that's audio, visual, digital history, etc., and provides both record and meaningful insights into your life. So those are the two core things, I guess there's three core things. There's records, there's narrative, and there's meaningful insight. And one of the aspects of that I wrote about a little bit while fleshing out this concept for an AI biographer was not just the factual aspects of purchasing, but the psychological, emotional aspects of what we purchase, how we purchase it, right? Because I'm pretty certain that, provided sufficient data, you could attach very specific through lines from point of making purchase A to outcome, emotion, experience, psychological state B, right? And especially this is, I think, with the greater the signal of purchase, right? The larger the purchase, this becomes more clear for individual items, but you can do it with collective purchasing, I believe, as well. And so this is just a really interesting concept to explore, and that, now that I'm a 27-year-old guy, I've spent actually millions of dollars at this point in my life. Maybe just hundreds of thousands. That's probably the better way to express it through my business and personal life. There's been hundreds and thousands of expenditures. So I've got this really large volume of data, I think, relative to most people my age, for purchases big and small, and the ways in which they impact you, psychologically, emotionally, physically, and things of that nature. And I guess I just want to share a couple of lessons, more for myself necessarily even than really anyone else. But if you're someone perhaps like me that wants to have a healthy relationship with money, you want to use your money, which oftentimes you're trading your life for, in a way that actually is beneficial, right? Because there's things that we think will make us enjoy life, and there's things that do make us enjoy life. And there's things that we think will give our lives value. There's things that actually give, right? So what's that discrepancy between perceived reality and factual reality? And what are those things that I've found that are perceived wants that most often result in a non-factual positive outcome, right? Like you think you want it, but it doesn't actually deliver the goods. And those things that you maybe don't necessarily think you want as much, but really do provide a greater sense of wellness and benefit. We can go this, I'm not going to go through this in any particular order, and I'm sure at some point I'll create a very structured version of this. But right now, this is just a very free-flowing thing. So I'll just kind of give some broad strokes. So one of the first things that I want to say in terms of it provide, like, let's go for like maybe some of the negatives first, things that really don't deliver. You know, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. I think this is most anything tied to like ego and keeping up with the Joneses, which some things, like you see this robot here in the background, right? Like some might view this, it's cutting the yard, whatever, as like a keeping up with the Joneses thing. But that frees up real time. I don't really, like, it's cool. It's kind of fun that people think it's cool. But the intent of this was never, I want to look cool. It's, I like technology, and two, I like having my time freed up, and I think it's worth more than the money it's going to cost me. In terms of like the lifetime, I've had this for what, the better part of like, I want to say, when did I get this? 2021? It's been 4 years. I mean, it doesn't completely negate your time spent on the yard, but it's a lot of time saved over 4 years of not having to go out and manually mow grass. So it's not a keeping up with the Joneses thing. It really does provide genuine, wonderful utility in my life. At a, like, the dollar to time saved ratio just increases the longer this thing goes on this household. It's very little to maintenance it. It's very little to keep it functional. Yeah. So that's one of those negatives, right? Things that are like egocentric, keeping up the Joneses, purchases for the sake of appearance. If it's exclusively appearance, often the juice is not worth the squeeze. A good bucket, a purchase for the sake of time and education, those two buckets are almost always, I found, to me, viewed positively in retrospect and in the present moment. Oftentimes, things that will save me time and energy, and effort also do simultaneously require me to learn something. Right? Every smart home device I've ever purchased, for the most part, I do not regret purchasing, and I feel has made a genuine benefit to my life, and has made me also a more competent person in learning to use them. So that's just right there and then. Yeah, that makes sense. Love that stuff. Anything that enhances my utility, tools. Almost every tool I've ever purchased, it's had a positive outcome. You know, things that, and then it goes into education as well. Education enhances your utility as a mind, right? You know, the more skillful you are intellectually, physically, creatively. I'm not certain creative is something that people can learn to be more skilled at, but I'm going to include it in there. Intellectually and physically, I think people can all become more competent. Creativity is one of those things that, you know, I'm not sure has been completely demystified to the point of replicable results. Yeah, that's fantastic, worthwhile. Now, a really tricky category, I'm going to think through this one. Purchases within the realm of health. That's actually been a super mixed bag. Some of the best purchases I've made have been related to health, and some of the worst purchases I've made have been related to health. This is an area where I think the deliverables provided by the world are so inconsistent in meeting their promises that's where most of the issue occurs. It's incredibly difficult to find products, goods, services, food, information that is quality as it relates to health. Yeah, like I really, like, for example, I paid probably, and this was a lot of money at the time for me. I think it was $1,500 or $2,000 for chiropractic services, because I just believed the sales pitch that some of the issues I was experiencing in life were spinal in nature. I feel like that did more harm than good from my time doing it. The things that I was having issues with never really seemed to have a noticeable impact. I think the issue, in retrospect, that I was experiencing was much more musculoskeletal, and the existing goods and services to solve that problem, I just don't think medical technology is up to par with solving my particular issues, at least not the traditional medical establishment. So, like, that was an example of in retrospect, a really bad purchase. I think that was wasted money across the board. I would rather have not done it. I wish I could go back and get that money. Not it. Gym membership, one of the best health purchases I've ever made. All the money I've spent in gym memberships across the year arguably have caused me issues in the sense of that I've injured myself weightlifting. I think that was a lack of proper application on my part. I was a dumb kid doing dumb things, not fully knowing what he was doing, and so I wish I had found better guidance on how to go about what I was doing and apply the proper mindset and recognize that my body was something that was going to be with me for my whole life, and that taking certain risks for short-term outcomes like a PR wasn't worth it, and that I should not exercise in a certain way. But, didn't have someone to teach me those things. So when and if I do have children, fortunately, they will benefit from that. But right now, yeah, I love going to my gym. I love the atmosphere. I love having a sauna, pool, the amenities. To the extent that you're willing to be social in those environments, it's usually good people. Everyone there is literally working on themselves. Where else do you get to go for an environment where every person in that environment, for the most part, is actively exerting effort to better themselves? That's a pretty unique, great environment. I think it's a great place to meet people. I think we need more places like that. So that's an example of a wonderful group with purchase. So my recommendation and advice there would be, thankfully, fortunately now, we have access to wonderful tools like GPT-5. I think GPT-5 thinking and Grok 4, these are some of the most powerful tools to ensure you are spending your money correctly when it comes to health, and to get more bang for your buck when it comes to health. The middleman, also known as doctors, in most of these instances, is usually the problem. I think you should use doctors almost exclusively for things that require physical manipulation of some sort, and then, as best you can, use the AI intelligences for diagnostic purposes, and processing, right? Like, if you need to get assessed for a physical injury, like, use everything possible you can outside of the medical establishment, right? One question at a time, describe your symptoms to an AI. Ask it to, what information does it need in terms of blood tests, imaging, or physical visual evaluation to provide a correct assessment for what you're experiencing, and what is its recommendations for how to proceed with correcting that issue. And most often the times, like, if you were just to spend $200 1 month and spend an active week or two collecting all the information possible and delivering to GPT-5 Pro Thinking, for example, everything it needs to diagnose every single set of potential health concerns you have and things that you're worrying about, from the physical to the psychological to the pharmaceutical, biochemical, etc. I think that's probably the highest value use of money that exists for every single person on the planet right now. Especially if you can join it with then, imaging, like professional imaging, like MRI, CT scan, like a lot of these things you can go and just pay for directly at a service and cut the middleman out. And then the doctor will give you like list of da 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 da, and then maybe from there you can take that list and you know you need to see a chiropractor or whatever. But like if you're shooting in the dark and you're spending money just to attempt fixes, it just becomes trial by error. And trial by error is crap. A lot of like it's better than nothing. Sometimes I think I have multiple health issues that simply came from doctors using trial by error on me. So yeah, I would implore every single human to avoid human diagnosticians unless it's a actual diagnostician and not some sort of niche practitioner. These people just have too narrow of sets of information. You know, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You know, you go to an ENT, all your symptoms are ENT. You go to a general doctor, it's the flu, it's a cold, it's a whatever. You go to a chiropractor, oh, it's your spine. Like, one, there's all the self-interest these people have in terms of making money. And then two, there's just the fact that they don't know that much. They're not that smart most of the time. I'm a pretty sharp dude. My IQ is somewhere between 125 and 140, depending on, you know, what metric, what vertical you're asking for. And almost every doctor I've ever talked to is stupid in comparison to my like level of intellectual depth that I'm capable of engaging in a topic. And like, yeah, I don't have their 10 years of schooling, but you know what does? ChatGPT. And I'm way better at now analyzing this information than they are. So if you're someone that's pretty sharp, even if you're not very sharp, I think your best bet is with these tools. And cutting out the middleman. Just cut him out. He's going to get you sicker. She is going to get you sicker, worse, in debt, cause you more problems, not correctly address your issue. Just do the best you can. Best practices are one question at a time, providing painstaking, like it requires a lot of diligence, like painstakingly providing what you can. So I don't need to go any deeper on that. That'll be a whole nother separate topic. It's actually a good video idea, how to use GPT-5 and GPT-5 Pro for diagnostic purposes. I think people get a lot of value out of that. Like the prompting for that is super high value. You're doing a good job, buddy. I appreciate you. What are some other categories? We've gone over health. I guess that pretty well synopses my opinions and ideas on the health space. And how to go about spending your money. Direct objective data, super huge, right? Scans, photos, videos, blood work, physical manipulation, right? What's your range of motion in these places? You know, like this is the bedrock of sound scientific evaluation of the body. Description of symptoms helps. Best way to get description of symptoms out is help me diagnose XYZ thing, ask me one question at a time, go as in depth as you need. That's generally the prompt that works for that. So, all right, we've talked about health, we've talked about education, we've talked about ego, keeping up with the Joneses. What are some other areas of purchasing? Wealth and investment. Some of the dollars that I've spent that have felt the most educational, informational, and beneficial is any and all money I have spent on investment, both active and passive. I think the more active you are with the investment funds spent, the more beneficial they are. I think that's pretty common sense. You combine labor and capital, intelligence of the application of labor and capital, and you get greater benefit, right? The tens of thousands of dollars I put into paying for and building my pest control business have taught me more, earned me more, and returned me more than any other use of funds that I've ever made, with the exception of one area, which is books. Books are the highest ROI investment on the planet, in my opinion. They're usually the lowest cost medium of the highest return item, which is education. Books are amazing. Following on to that, I know this isn't politically correct to say, and I do not necessarily condone this behavior, but there's a lot of free information on the internet, however you would like to go about finding that. If you are somebody who is poor and don't have the means to purchase certain things, there are ways to acquire those things on the internet. And I think as someone who lacks capital, despite the fact that this is, people worked hard and put time and effort and energy into creating a lot of this information that's available out there, you can acquire it for free if you so choose. And I'll leave that up to your interpretation, how you want to go about doing that. But I think one of the best things for, we don't live in a capitalist system, and the ugly, brutal reality of a capitalist system is that you're going to war for your time, attention, energy, and money. And it is your job as a individual actor in the system to maximally look out for your interest. So I would implore you to do that the best you can. The least outflow, like the return on $0 spent is infinite. So yeah, if you like, free, right, has infinite upside. It's great. What was I on? I was just talking about investment. So that's on the the business side, right? One of the highest return things you can do is to synthesize everything you have into some sort of personal venture. I'm not going to say this necessarily strictly in terms of business, but things that you own, right? Ownership is probably the most powerful gateway into wealth. Ownership of your ideas, ownership of your data, ownership of your conversation, ownership of your time, attention, energy. The more you own, the wealthier you will be most oftentimes. And this ownership takes the form of all types of property: physical, financial, intellectual, sometimes even spiritual. I'm not the most spiritual person, so I'm not a great education resource on that, or even someone that should really, I'm not a valid opinion in that space. Don't listen to me about anything spiritual, aside from perhaps the softer sides of things, but God's deities, that's something everyone needs to make their own decision on. So yeah, ownership. It's owning things is beautiful. It really is. It teaches you to care for things. It teaches you the value of things. It teaches you how to build, how to preserve, how to maintain. This video, in effect of itself, if you put out a channel, like one of the easiest ways to get into ownership is have some sort of social media, right? You own your page. These are digital manifestations continued out for all time that you own, right? If I record this one piece of content, it will exist for all intents and purposes forever. It's wonderful. And it will continue to work for you long after you've died. Our digital presence will outlive all of us. So you wonder why data is so valuable. The longest lived thing in human civilization is ideas. That's kind of like ideas and DNA. But DNA is simply the physical encodement of evolutionary data. So information is the longest lived thing about human civilization. DNA specifically, the longest type of information. But beyond that, we have a very mimetic culture. Right? Mimetic being ideas, memes, right? That's where that word comes from. You can own an idea and attach yourself to it, evangelize it, again, I'm not a very spiritual person, but I think just about everyone in Western culture knows the words Jesus Christ and who that label attaches to, right? Like Jesus Christ owned the idea, without getting too theological, right? But that's attached to Christianity, Christ, that religion, that belief system, that faith. It's been around for thousands of years. You know, the Old Testament, thousands of years. Writing in and of itself, 5,000 plus years. Pictograms, you know, art, illustrations of the world around us, tens of thousands of years. These things long outlast us. So if you want to own something, it's an easy entry point. Then from there, you've got your time, attention, energy, and labor. You know, if you're to look up the step ladder, right, of economic value, you've got, you know, you're a person that doesn't know how to do anything, right? Oh, you must work for somebody, or acquire through somebody or some source, knowledge of how to apply your time and attention and energy in a way that's economically valuable, right? So, you know, it's the standard employee to that standard ladder of, like, you start out as some form of employee, right? And then you become self-employed, and then you become or even if you look at it through the corporate ladder, right? You know, there's junior, there's senior, right? Low skill, high skill, there's manager, right? You know, supervising others, which is a function of helping to facilitate and ensure people are educated and within tolerances at the correct skill levels, and there's someone who's more developed, and then it's just this ladder of going from low level to high level, and which is mostly a function of experience, education, etc., and so on. So all this to say, I can think of almost no instance where I feel that the finances put towards investment, ownership, have ever really been on a downside, with very specific caveats. Depreciating items. I'm not going to call them assets. I'm going to call them items. This would be things like certain types of cars. I would view these more as consumables. Anything that's a consumable. The best use of money are things that lose the least value, and that enable the most tangential value, right? You know, if you purchase a car that lasts the longest, runs the cheapest, and delivers most of the utility you're looking for out of that car, is the most valuable car to you, right? And the reason we have all these different car brands is what that car means to you is different for everybody. But all that to say, you know, like, this is an area where ownership, I'd say, is something to be aware of, right? Like this robot here, right? I'm not going to go sell that for what I paid for it. I paid full retail, more or less. I got it like a slight discount because I used to be in the business and I knew the guy, and yeah, all that, which is partially a function of I just had information. I know how much he's making off the robot, so I can be like, hey man, I'm gonna buy it for this. Just, that's what I'm buying it for. So when it comes to ownership, that is one thing, right? You want to look at the set of options, and you know, we all only live for a certain period of time, right? So we all don't really fully own anything. Right? We own it for a period of time. That's ownership at the individual level, and to the extent that you care about legacy, family, and that your government allows for those sorts of things, maybe you want to extend your time horizon for consideration on ownership past your lifespan. But for most people, it's really only important to consider your lifespan. So there are things that, you know, are good as ownership, etc. I don't need to get too down in the depths of that, but that's just something to be mindful of and consider. The things that I've owned: cars, cheaper, low maintenance, easy to maintain. That's usually been better. Usually been happier with those things. The happiness more so came from a lack of headaches and issue and drain. You know, I don't have maintenance bills that are preventing me from doing other things I want to do with my money. It's a function of value. I don't think if there's anything I've owned beyond my Audi that was really annoying and that I was upset to own after a point in time. And I was just not in the right financial position to have that vehicle. But it did deliver great utility and things that I wanted it for. Like, it was a all-wheel drive, you know, handled the winter climates really well. I loved that about it. I I think I could have gotten a cheaper version of that than I would like, but hey, oh well. You know, you live and you learn. What else? Anything else I've owned? I mean, the main things that I haven't enjoyed owning are cheap and frivolous. Mostly cheap stuff. Things that broke, that didn't last, didn't stand the test of time, didn't deliver the utility I thought they were promised. Most negative ownership is associated with those realms. Yeah, I think that's most of my thoughts that I've kind of come through on use of money. I'm not sure if there's investment, there's health, consumption, education. Well, I guess one category I haven't covered is experiences. Make sure this is still recording. Yeah, we're still recording. So this is a funky bucket. This is a very funky bucket. There's actually two: experiences and relationships. What makes these funky is there's a sense of ephemeral, right? There's a lack of tangibility to much of experiences and relationships. Unfortunately, the digital age, you know, smartphones, etc., have allowed for some tangibility through the recording of video, audio, etc. The more tangible you can make these things, the more you can soak up, I think, passively and actively from these experiences and preserve and crystallize them as things to look back on or lessons to learn from or opportunities for creation, for enriching the narrative of your life. I think the better, right? So the more that you can tie that part of relationships and experiences into your life, I think the better. Like it amplifies any sort of spending you do in that space. But some of the best experiences of my life have come from spending on relationships and travel, exploration, having cars that work well enough to get me from A to B. I mean, driving from Washington down to Starbase, Texas, before it was Starbase, Texas. I'll cherish that for the rest of my life. I think fondly on it often and often want to be there. Relationships. I've had two real major relationships in my life. The first one, I would say, I reluctantly say the money I spent in that space was positive because I learned a lot from it. Not necessarily because the relationship was so great, but because it was so bad. And then the second relationship, a mixture of just, you know, it continues to enrich my life day to day, and also the good and bad lessons from it. So I would say one thing is the only time, like, that's most of the good, right? Positive emotions, happiness, joy, you know, most purchases made in that to like go out to dinner or travel somewhere or watch a movie or, you know, buy them a present, etc. The only times I have not gotten a positive experience out of those was when I was not fully convinced. You got a plane going over. It's when I was not fully convinced that I wanted to be there when I made those purchases. That I wanted to be with that person, that situation with those people, or when it was done out of a sense of expected reciprocity. I think those two circumstances, when you're not certain about wanting to be there in that place with that person, and when there's attached to the circumstance a expectation of reciprocity, I think that's when you should be very cautious and wary about spending money when it comes to travel and relationships. More so because I think it has the possibility of backfiring and doing much more harm, creating feelings of resentment. When I truly was in a generous giving mood and gave something to somebody with no expectation of return, purely for the act of wanting to be giving, I've never regretted that. When I have given someone something with the expectation I would receive something of equal or greater value, I was not too happy if that didn't occur, and it soured the experience, both of giving, receiving, and I think harmed the relationship or the experience of being somewhere unnecessarily. If you travel to somebody expecting them to travel to you next and then they don't, right, that you can see how that would sour. You buy somebody a big gift expecting you're also getting a big gift and you don't, that could sour. Easiest way to do that, be mindful, be cautious, be wary. You're not certain you want to be in a relationship with somebody and you purchase them something of moderate value, something that's you would have liked to have spent an equivalent value on yourself, but you didn't for their benefit, and there was no reciprocity, right? These are, or not even necessarily there's no reciprocity, but then you end up later leaving that person or leaving that place, and you're gone. Yeah. So those would be some situations with regard to relationships and travel. A particular note on relationships and travel. The best money I think I've ever spent has been those things that are grand, adventurous, and bold. The highest return, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, came from adventurous, grand, and bold uses of money. I think it's better to have a single $2,500 travel experience than five $500 travel experiences. The more upstream you go in this department, I think the more you get. There's ways to achieve similar effects. Don't get me wrong, but usually it's harder. If you're not willing to spend time or completely uproot your life, it's much harder to do those things. So for those not willing to spend as much time and uproot your life to have grand, bold, adventurous, usually you have to compensate with money. That's just kind of the unfortunate situation there. So you can have equally grand, bold, adventurous. That's why I think when you're young is one of the best times to go do those things, because, well, you don't have much to lose. You're already poor. If you're already poor, you're not going to lose money by, you're losing time and opportunity cost, but like those are less tangible, and I think youth is best spent, your body's hardier. The advice I will give my children is to spend as much of their life from 18 to 25, 16 to 25, focusing primarily on education, finding the right partner, having correct experiences. I think that's, when you're meant to, you're resilient, you're bold, you're healthy. For most people, one of the few regrets I will have is that I didn't do more of that when I was younger, more healthy. So that's why my advice would be that there. So that's my last note on travel and relationships. I believe there's only one last item to touch on with regard to spending money and the ups and downs and positives and negatives of it, and what I've learned in this space. And it's very related to what I just spoke about. Because a few of the the largest, at least in contemporary society, where we still have things like work and money, one of the most impactful decisions you'll ever make is where you live, what you do, who you do it with, right? It's the big three right there. It's going to impact everything. Maybe number 4 is how you educate yourself. That might be number 4. So those are kind of the big 4. And of course, the how you educate yourself is tied into all 3 of those. Education is a very geographic thing for the most part. So yeah, where you live. I think one of the best things you can do is to spend, if I could do one thing for every 18-year-old, it would be to have them have $15,000 and a budget crap car to then go and stay and explore every place they think they might want to live, and even in places they don't think they want to live, the places they think they would love and hate, nothing in between, and spend a good few months of your life doing that, because nothing really has more of an outsized impact on your life than where you live. It's everything. Your environment is the macro, right? Your specific residence and your general geography, to huge impacts, right? I couldn't make these videos if I was in an apartment, right? Not like this. I could go to a park or go more public, but I've got privacy in an enclosed yard for the most part. I can talk to this camera. You don't get that at a park or you live in an apartment. Like, you just don't. Yeah. So, where you live. One of the biggest, I think, negatives of my life is that I didn't orchestrate my life to live in a different environment sooner. I always wanted to live in a more city-based environment from when I was younger, and I think I should have put off other ambitions in order to move somewhere. I think that would have been the best decision for me, and I didn't do it. And every year I don't continue to do it. It's rather upsetting, but I've unfortunately entrenched myself and established roots in a location that I'm less than in love with. My gut knew at 18. It knew. I did lack the skills and economics, etc. But like, you can find a way. I could have gone back and found a way. Like, yeah. So my experience there has been it's probably been one of the more negative experiences of my life, is continuing to choose to live where I do currently live, and not sooner putting myself in a position to not be here. That's it. I'll probably have that optionality later this next year, but in the meantime, it's my life. Okay, so this is a pretty long video. I think I'm gonna go back, condense this, extract some notes from the text audio, maybe make a couple of attached pieces of content related to this. I know there's like one or two ideas that spun off really nicely. Yeah, spend more of your time making, spend more of your time creating. It's really nice in this day and age to have more of. We all spend so much time consuming, and that you might output in your life for work, but outputting for yourself, I think is really important. It adds some texture to your life, and it's a forced moment of silence and contemplation and clarifying of your own ideas and beliefs and experiences. And I'll probably learn more from this than anybody else, because I'm just reflecting and sharing my own life experiences. So I think it's very valuable, and to the extent that, public or private, you can incorporate that. Just do this for yourself. Never put the video out, just purely make them for yourself. And it'll be wonderful in 10 years from now. When I'm 37 and I look back at this, I'll wonder, wow, that was that moment of inflection where I further took another step towards the clarity of making the correct decisions that moved my life in this positive direction, right? Or gave me an idea to incorporate into this product that is now a big part of my life and other people's lives. Yeah. So I implore you, video journal, physical written journal, tweeting, Snapchat videos, just everyone do it, public or private. Just put something out. Do it for yourself. That's my ask. I'm not going to ask you to like, comment, or subscribe. I'm going to ask you to do that for yourself. Make one of these videos for yourself. Put it up. Don't put it up. What are your learnings and lessons from the positives and negatives of how you've spent money? Is those categories spent money in categories? That's my ask. I think that's what my asks will be. I don't want anyone to Okay, it's not true. I do want people to like follow and pay attention, but only in so much as they it's helping someone's life. You know, if this is a waste of time, don't listen to me. If you already know this, go do something more beneficial. Yeah, I want people to learn from my mistakes. I'm 27. I've made a lot of mistakes. If I can stop any one of you from making any of those mistakes, that's a win. If I can save you pain and suffering, more than making your life better, I just want your life not to suck. So, yeah, thanks for hanging out. Peace.